I'd like to welcome everybody. This is Daryl Davis, accomplished musician and an accidental race relations expert. And we are doing a viewing party tonight to kick off TEDx Naperville. And we all watched his feature film documentary called Accidental Courtesy. If you haven't seen it, it is on Amazon Prime. And you can also see it iTunes. I believe you can rent it for 99 cents. And I found a website called Canopy, and maybe we'll put it in some notes somewhere, called Kanopy, that you sign up for free, and it's attached to your library card, and you can watch movies for free. So you can watch your film for free. And it's a fascinating film. And I'm going to pull up for please start asking your questions for Daryl in the chat for people that have seen the movie. But hold the questions. I'm just going to jump in with a couple questions that are addressed in the movie. If you can tell the audience, so how many Klan robes do you have? Because I know that
I now have between 54 and 57, I believe.
54?
Yeah. But it's not just robes and hoods. I have all kinds of stuff. I have Klan flags, neo-Nazi flags, T-shirts, belt buckles, medallions. It's all kinds of stuff. In terms of just the robes themselves, robes and hoods, I'd say between 54 and 57.
And how do you? And for the people that maybe are not as familiar with your story, how did you get all this stuff?
The people give it to me when they renounce. I started collecting them a long time ago. I've been doing this kind of work, for in 2021 it'll be 37 years. Music is my profession, but doing race relations work has been my obsession.
And do you have like a museum inside your house?
Actually, no, I don't keep a lot of them in my house, but I keep them locked up off site. I have a few here in the house, but I have my 501c3, so I'm looking for a building to purchase to set up a museum. But in the meantime, I'm going to be loaning a lot of my neo-Nazi and KKK stuff to the Orlando Holocaust Center. And they are having a museum exhibit of my stuff for about a year. And then it will travel around the country and then come back to me.
No kidding. And so it's going to go through the Chicago area, do you know?
I hope so, yeah. Hope so. And I'm not loaning them all of it, but a good portion.
Well, keep us in the loop on that.
I will, absolutely.
Yeah, fascinating. So I know that you have so much stuff, and it's just got to be bizarre for somebody to see that. They're like, where do you get this?
Believe me, I have more stuff than I have room for in my own house. I have that much stuff.
I just like it because I think for people that want to see something tangible, visible, that represents what you're about, it's kind of a neat tradition. It's kind of like, well, some people throw stuff in trees at their bars. You throw their stuff in, but now here you have a different approach of leaving the Klan. So I'm going to jump into some of the questions people are starting to put. So here's one from a James that says, that was a pretty powerful scene talking to the millennial black activists. What are your thoughts and your take on the BLM movement and creating connection during so much visceral anger? Big question. Oh,
sure.
It popped up. Jonathan pulled it up. Thank you.
I'm happy to address that. Yeah, that was quite a scene. And let me tell you something. You only saw about 8 minutes there, James. That scene went on for just over an hour, and it almost got to physical blows. It almost erupted into violence. However, about a year later, those same people reached out to me, and we got together and we had dinner, and we got along fine, and we agreed to do some work together. And the older gentleman that you saw in there, he and I got together. He wanted me to come speak at one of his functions, which I did. And somehow or another, he fell off the wagon and reverted back to the angry person that he was in the movie that you just saw. So he's back on the outs again. But the young guy, he and I are still on good terms.
I just find that fascinating because watching the film, it's almost like, oh, see, there are some people that are just not going to connect over this, but here you go with your technique of just discussing, and here you go.
But also let me be clear about something in terms of BLM, Black Lives Matter. This is my personal opinion. I think that the idea behind it was an excellent idea in the formation of the movement. Understand something. It is a movement. It is not an organization. So James, you called it right, the movement. The idea in creating it was taken from Martin Luther King. The idea behind Black Lives Matter is to put the national spotlight on the plight of Black men who, for lack of a better term, are being murdered by white police officers. So they get to go to their graves, where white men in the same situation either go home or go to jail. Some go to jail via Burger King, as in the case with Dylan Roof. Dylan Roof was the young white supremacist who walked into the Black church in Charleston, South Carolina, and murdered 9 Black people who were there doing nothing but conducting Bible study. And he was armed and dangerous. And when he was apprehended and put inside the police car to be arrested, he said he was hungry. And the police took him to Burger King and bought him a hamburger and then took him to jail and fingerprinted and photographed him and put him in the cell. So, you know, reasons like that are why Black Lives Matter was formed, to put the national spotlight on that. And that's exactly what Martin Luther King did with the Rosa Parks and the bus boycott. Many of you may not know, or some of you do, that Rosa Parks was not the first person to refuse to give up her seat on the bus. But that only made news around Montgomery, Alabama. People in New York or Los Angeles or Idaho or wherever, you know, they didn't know anything about it. So King decided to put the national spotlight on it, conduct this boycott and everything. And that's exactly what worked and got the laws changed, not only in Montgomery, but throughout the South, where there was a segregation in busing. So it's a great idea that BLM, you know, did to put that on the plight of Black men being murdered. However, what I think that they did wrong is they intentionally did not want to centralize the movement, and I think that was wrong. I think in hindsight, they had no idea how large BLM would become. BLM was born in the wake of the Trayvon Martin murder down in Sanford, Florida, if you remember that, with George Zimmerman. And was that 2013, I believe. Anyway, they did not want to centralize, and they did not want to trademark the name. So anybody out there who's watching me right now, you, Arthur here, myself, any one of us can walk out in the street right now and start a BLM because there is no trademark for the name. So as a result, there are 80 or 90 different, you can't even call them chapters, because chapters belong to a main organization. So you would call them factions. There are 80 or 90 different BLM factions all over the country. Some consist of predominantly Black supremacists. Others consist of Blacks and whites working together. Some are predominantly white. Some are out there being very aggressive and destructive. And others are sitting down with state legislature or city legislature and trying to work on bills together to say, hey, you know, we need this. Let's try to create a law for this and that and the other. So there are different ways of approaching things, and people are not on the same page. So as a result, let's say you're in Naperville, and let's say the Naperville BLM is doing something constructive by sitting down with the Naperville city legislature and trying to get some laws created and passed. And meanwhile, a BLM group in Chicago, my hometown, by the way, is out there tearing up stuff and spray painting graffiti all over the place and acting violently. The media does not separate them. The media does not report the Chicago BLM versus the Naperville BLM. It just says BLM was doing this. And so whatever one BLM movement or faction is doing, it reflects over the whole movement. And that's the bad thing about not being centralized. By centralized, I mean you have an organization like, say, the NAACP or the Red Cross or the Boy Scouts of America, where policy is created right there at headquarters and disseminated to all the chapters all over the country, so everybody is on the same page. You have one leader, and everybody follows that policy from the main headquarters. As a result, right now, you got too many chefs in the kitchen. Each person, in a little leadership role of his own or her own BLM movement, may not agree with somebody else. And so therefore they're divided. And, you know, we've come a long ways to be divided. We don't need division amongst ourselves right now. We need more unity.
So what's your advice for the movement to get that unity?
Well, you know, it's kind of hard to put the wild horses back in the stables, you know, once you open those stable doors. I would try to encourage people to come together, you know, have an election or whatever, you know, elect one national president for the whole movement, and come together in one large coalition and take these factions and turn them into chapters. And they all can vote on what policies they want, and then everybody be on the same page. So when they call for a rally, they all know what to do and what not to do. And they're not off running in different directions. I mean, a lot of them may have some good ideas. Some of them have some bad ideas. But the main thing is everybody needs to be unified in their mission, in their goal, and their strategy. That's the most important thing. You can't be running out here willy-nilly and doing different things.
Can I nominate you to run for president?
No, not me, man.
And I mean, I'm 100% sincere in that too. I'd love to see some leadership. But thanks for sharing that perspective. That really, I don't think a lot of people know that, or they don't see the media gets to pick and choose what they want to show you, and you dive into that viewpoint, and then that's your viewpoint, and you beat that drum, not knowing that the bigger picture. Jonathan's going to pull up a question. There's one from Amy asked, have you met Trump? And if you have or had not, here it is. What would you say to him?
Okay. I've not met Donald Trump. I performed for Donald Trump back around 1999, 2000, somewhere, long before he ever got into politics. He had some big fundraiser, and I was part of the entertainment. My job was backing up, performing on my own, and my band backing up Jerry Lee Lewis and Sam Moore from Sam and Dave. But no, I did not meet him. I would have a lot to say to him. How much time do you all have on your hands?
What's the 30? You're in an elevator. You've got 30 seconds. What's the 30-second?
That you need to sit down, shut up, and listen to somebody. Listen to somebody and absorb what they have to say. It's not all about you.
That's actually a really good 30-second answer. Sit down, shut up, and listen. I love that. One question is, Amy asks, I'm going to read the question here, that whites have shifted dramatically to the Republican Party since Obama's election, and here it is, in 2008. This, of course, has had huge policy implications. How have you been able to get white people to care about policies that affect blacks?
Say it one more time. What did you say about the Republican Party?
Yeah, it says whites have shifted dramatically to the Republican Party since Obama's election in 2008. This, of course, has huge policy implications. How have you been able to get white people to care more for? Whoops, I just lost it too. How do you get white people to care more about policies that affect blacks? Okay,
well, the Republican Party is a very large party, and it's always had a lot of white people. Now, you know, let's go back. I'm taking Amy. I don't know how old you are. But I'm assuming that you're probably younger than I am. I'm 62 years old. And back in the day, you know, the Republican Party, most black people were Republicans. And the Klan, the KKK, Ku Klux Klan, was born out of the Democrat Party. Most black people were Republicans. And you want to know why? Because it was the party of Lincoln. And Lincoln was a hero to black people. He's the one who freed the slaves. So naturally, when we became free and were able to join a political party, black people joined the Republican Party. And this went on through about 1965 or so, when a Barry Goldwater, who was a senator, he was a big-time racist. And he ran for president. Of course, he lost. But Barry Goldwater was a big-time racist in the Republican Party. And other Republicans began turning racist. And the Democrats began turning liberal. And so blacks shifted from the Republican Party to the Democrats. It did like a complete flip-flop. Now, of course, I'm not going to sit here and say all Democrats are racist or all Democrats are welcoming and all Republicans are racist. No, there's racism on both sides in both parties. But right now you have most Black people in the Democrat Party, and whereby they were in the Republican Party at one time a long time ago. Now, in terms of how to get them to sit down and listen, you frame it as you want to have a conversation. Don't frame it as a debate, although you will debate issues, but don't frame it as a debate. Just say, hey, listen, I just want to have a conversation with you. I want to try to understand why you feel the way you do, why you don't like certain policies that the Democrats may have, or why you feel the Republicans have a better approach to this or the other. I want to learn from you. That's how you frame the conversation. Because as soon as people feel, less intruded upon. If you say you want to have a conversation, you want to hear what they have to say. But as soon as you say debate, the wall goes up, they're ready to fight, they're ready to defend something. And let me tell you something. You learned in the film, for those of you who watched it, that I was the child of parents in the U.S. Foreign Service. I grew up as an American embassy brat, traveling to different countries, living in them for 2 years, and then returning home to the States, and then back overseas again for 2 years, back home, etc. This took place starting at the age of 3 and through my formative, years until teenage. And then now as a professional musician, I got my college degree in music, and I'm a professional musician and performer, and I play around the world. So if you combine my travels from childhood with my travels from adulthood as a musician, put them together, I have been in a total of 57 different countries around the world on 6 continents. So I've literally been exposed to a multitude of ethnicities, colors of skin, cultures, religions, beliefs. You name it, I have seen it. And I can tell you something. No matter how far I have gone from my own country, right here, the United States, no matter how far or how near, whether it's been right next door to Canada or to Mexico or halfway around the planet, and no matter how different people have appeared to me, how different they may look, how different they speak, or what they believe in, what they practice, etc., who they worship, when I come home, I conclude one thing. We all are human beings. And as such, we all want basically the same 5 things. We want to be loved. We want to be respected. We want to be heard. We want to be treated fairly. And we want the same things for our family as anybody else wants for their family. And if we keep those things in mind, that we all are human beings and we all want those basic 5 core things, we can navigate through any society, any group of people, whether it's Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Independents, you name it. The KKK, the alt-right, the neo-Nazis, some of them may be a little more difficult than others, but they still want those five core things. So we keep that in mind and approach it that way. Yes, we can sit down with people, to your point, Republicans or whoever, and have these conversations and make some headway. But if you don't give those people that, there's no reason for them to give you the same thing in return. One of my favorite quotes of all time is called the Travel Quote by Mark Twain. And Mark Twain said, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime." And I think, all the travel that I did during my youth and today has prepared me to be able to sit down and have these conversations with people, because I just view them as a different culture. The culture of Republicans, the culture of white supremacy, the culture of Black supremacy, the culture of whatever. That's how I view it, and that's how I approach it. Now, having had all this travel under my belt does not make me a better person than someone who has not traveled. No, I'm not saying that at all. It just gives me a wider and broader perspective and gives me more tools to be able to navigate around people who may be different than myself. And the thing of it is, most Americans do not travel. They don't travel. In fact, according to the Census Bureau, only about 50% of us even have passports. You know, I live about 25 minutes from Washington, D.C., from the heart of Washington, D.C. I live 15 minutes from the border, from the line. I'm in Maryland. And I could be at the White House, at the Washington Monument on a non-traffic day in about 25 minutes. And it's just south of me. About 15 minutes north of me, I know people who've lived there all their life, and they've never even been down to D.C. to the monument. You know, people just don't travel. Or they go to the beach or something.
Man, you said a lot. Great quote from Mark Twain. Isn't there like another saying that says like empathy stops as far as like your arms can reach, what your eyes can see?
That's right.
Which is another classic one. But to sum up, so what I'm hearing, and it kind of fits your story, that a secret to a lot of this discourse or conflict we have is just reaching out to somebody who you may disagree with 100% and saying, hey, we sit down? I want to learn. Because it seems overly simple, but that's hard. I mean, because when you say you want to learn, you're telling the other person that I may be wrong and I don't understand you. And I don't think that takes courage.
We all have been wrong at one time or another. You know, that's how we learn. I mean, I've met people that I've misjudged. I thought, you know, they were total, you know, people I didn't want to be associated with. And, you know, they ended up becoming good friends of mine. And then there have been people who I thought were good friends, and lo and behold, I found out, you know, they were not. So, you know, we all, you know, make mistakes, but we should never judge somebody without getting to know them or know about them. Just judge them on the color of their skin or where they go to worship, whether they go to a mosque, a synagogue, a temple, or a church. You know, that doesn't provide us any information as to their character.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, that's what I mean. It sounds like it's easy to learn, difficult to master, at least for a lot of people. Jonathan's going to bring up. Jody has a question, and as soon as he brings it up on the banner, so Jonathan, if you want to bring up the Jonathan's our producer. People, I should probably mention that Jonathan's in Nashville, handling the production. Oh, it's a big question.
So I put my glasses on for that.
So Jody says, I want to share the difference you made tonight. I'm a single mom to a 12-year-old boy. He came out shortly before the viewing party and asked me if I wanted to play a game. As important as a moment like this is, I said no, and I told him there was something I needed to watch. When he asked me what, I brought up your TEDx Naperville talk, and my son said, what is KKK? So I started to play your TEDx, and when it got to the point where you heard the noise and stood up at your desk, his anxiety kicked in and said, I can't listen. I'm too scared to know. I've surrounded him closely with the African-American community, who many are not family to him. He got in trouble at his dad's house when he stood up to his new stepmom when she said black people do not deserve the same privileges as white people. I wish he would never have to know something like the KKK, but I'm glad he learned about it from you tonight. Someday he'll be ready for the rest of your TEDx, but the impact hit him deeply. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody, for sharing that. You're very welcome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, you know, this is America. This is our country. And, you know, our society can only become one of two things. It can become one, that which we sit back and watch it become, or it can become two, that which we stand up and make it become. So we have to ask ourselves the question, do I want to sit back and see what my country becomes, or do I want to stand up and make my country become what I want to see? And I've chosen the latter. And obviously you have too. And, you know, not everybody has to be on the front line. I'm not encouraging everybody here, you know, next time a Klan rally happens to be down the road from your house, you know, go and attend the Klan rally. No, not if you don't feel comfortable doing that, or you don't feel comfortable watching a certain thing, you don't have to do that. You can still contribute to improving society from the back lines. Like Arthur here just mentioned, John, who's running this whole thing behind the scenes. He's down in Nashville. He's operating the camera. Each time you see Arthur and I switch places or be spotlighted on the screen, that's John doing that. And, you know, you don't see him, but he is very effective in what he is doing. So there are ways that we all can improve society, whether it's on the front line or behind the scenes. And, you know, let your son grow. You know, you show him little bit by little bit, and he will turn out to be a fantastic person. And good for him for standing up. And so, you know, you should be the proud mom.
What's a good tip? And I'm trying to think of like everything's so polarized, and I think the media really fans the flame. But is there any good trick to catch yourself to have that conversation with somebody that you disagree with 100%? And when you're
Sure.
like, all right,
Okay, so and this can be applied to any situation. Obviously, the whole movie you just saw was about race, and that's what we're talking about tonight. But it can be applied to any situation where you have hot topics. In fact, let's take race off the table for a moment. We could discuss abortion, nuclear weapons, global warming, the environment, the war in the Middle East, the current election. All these are hot topics. And you're on one side, somebody else is on the other side. So how do you sit down and have a conversation with those people? The first thing you should do is this: learn as much as you can about their position. Put yourself in their shoes. Try to make yourself accept their position for a moment, and try to understand why they feel the way they do. They may not be bad people. They may be good people with a bad idea. Or maybe they're bad people with a bad idea. You don't know. But put yourself in their shoes, all right, and try to understand where they're coming from, keeping in mind where you're coming from. Learn as much as you can about them, because once you get together with them, even if they don't like you, if they see that you have taken the time to learn something about them and you can speak on the same level with them on that topic, they will respect you. While they may not agree with you, they will respect you. And that's the first key. And be open to letting them talk. Give them a platform. Allow them to air their views, regardless of how much you disagree with them. Because the idea is this: you want to be able to learn from them what it is they're fearing, what it is they don't know, that you could set straight. Or perhaps there might be something that they're telling you that you didn't know. And you might be making a mistake. It might open your mind as well. So it's always important to learn as much as you can about them. And then once they've shared with you, then you can share with them. I'm going to give you an example of something that happens with me quite frequently. In fact, the question that I asked when I was age 10, and I've been looking for the answer since then, is how can you hate me when you don't even know me? So when I would interview, and I still interview a lot of them, KKK members and things like that, when they walk into the room and see me, instantly that wall goes up. I am not the object of their affection. So as soon as they see me, they're ready to pounce, they're ready to attack, radiate hate, insults, vitriol, whatever. So normally, when they do that, there's going to be pushback. So I'll give you an example. I'm sitting 2 feet away from a Klan leader that I'm interviewing. I'm like, how can you hate me? You don't even know me. I just met you 10 minutes ago. All you see is this, my skin color, and you make some judgment on me, some negative judgment on me. Well, Mr. Davis, you have to understand, Black people are prone to crime. There are more Black people in prison than white people. That's his evidence that Black people are prone to crime, because there are more Black people in prison than white people. Now, what he is saying is true. It's absolutely true. There are more Black people in prison than white people. But what he is saying is also a half-truth, because he is not considering the imbalance in our judicial system that puts more Black people in prison than white people for the same crime. And also, he's not considering the fact that there are plenty of poor white people and Black people who are sitting in prison because they could not afford adequate legal representation. So they take a plea to something they didn't even do, and there they sit. And then he goes on to tell me that Black people are inherently lazy. We don't want to work. We prefer to scam the government welfare system. We have our hands out for every free program that we can get, And then he tells me this, that Black people are born with a smaller brain than white people. And see, the more capacity, the larger the brain, the more capacity for intelligence. So white people have this size brain, Black people have that size brain. So therefore, we are inferior. And then he goes on to say that that is evidenced by the fact that Black kids consistently, year after year, score lower on the SATs than white kids. Again, that is true. Black kids do score lower year after year on the national average on the SATs than white kids. But it's a half-truth, because where do most Black kids go to school? In the inner city. And the inner city schools are not as good as the schools in the suburbs. Where do most white kids go to school? In the suburbs. Now, I can tell you this for a fact. The Black kids who do go to school in the suburbs score just as high and sometimes higher than white kids in the suburbs. And white kids who go to school in the inner city score just as low as the Black kids, sometimes even lower. So it has absolutely nothing to do with the color of skin or the size of one's brain. It has everything to do with the quality of that particular educational system. But see, he doesn't see that. He sees the results of the SATs or the number of people in prison. So keep in mind, one's perspective is one's reality. Whatever you perceive is your reality. So you cannot change somebody else's reality. What you can do is offer them another perspective. And if they see your perspective, then their reality will change. They will change it themselves. So let me show you exactly what happens. So I'm sitting there listening to this person. Now, normally, when somebody spews out that kind of vitriol, there's going to be pushback, within 30 to 45 seconds. It's going to be verbal pushback. It may even escalate to physical confrontation. All right? I'm not doing that. I'm just sitting back, listening to him. I'm giving him some of those 5 things I told you about. People want to be heard. They want to be respected. They want to be treated fairly. I'm giving him respect. Understand something. I am not respecting what he has to say. I am respecting his right to say it. So I know you all understand the difference. So I'm giving him the respect. I'm allowing him to be heard. And I'm treating him fairly. So now I'm not going to let my emotions get in front of me and cause an explosion, because then the whole thing will just devolve and nothing has been productive. It all shut down. So I maintain my emotions. Now, do I consider what he's saying? He's calling me a criminal. He's calling me lazy. He's calling me unintelligent because of my skin color. Do I consider that to be offensive? Absolutely, it's offensive. Am I offended by it? Absolutely not. And why not? Because it's not true. Why should I be offended by an untruth? Why should I put my emotions in front of me and be offended by an untruth? This man doesn't know me. He just walked in my room 10 minutes ago, and he sees my skin color and he makes these assertions. Now, if my mother or father were to tell me, Daryl, I think you're prone to crime. I think you're lazy, and I think you're kind of dumb, not very intelligent. Maybe I would consider believing them. After all, they brought me into this world. They raised me, but not somebody who just walked in my room. Don't let your emotions get in front of you. All right. So now the wall was up when he saw me, because I'm giving him these things, being heard, being respected, and being treated fairly. The wall is coming down. All right. If the wall is up and you want to plant a seed, you can't plant it while the wall is up. The seed hits the wall and bounces back on your side, because he's like this. He's not hearing anything you have to say. You reduce the temperature, let the wall come down. All right. So now he has spewed all his vitriol. The wall is down, and because I allowed him to be heard, I gave him the respect of listening to him. I'm treating him fairly. He feels compelled to reciprocate. So now it's my turn. I could go on the attack and attack him, and I would be well within my right to do so. I could say, no, you are the one who's a criminal. You're the one who's hanging Black men from trees and bombing Black churches and shooting up people and dragging them behind pickup trucks. And I would be 100% correct, because that has gone on with the Ku Klux Klan for over 150 years. So I would be absolutely right. But if I go on that kind of offense, what's going to happen? The wall's going to go back up. His ears are going to shut me out. All right. So rather than go on the offense, I go on the defense. And my defense is such that it is an offense. And my seed goes over the wall and into his ground. What I say is this. I hear what you're saying. However, while there may be more blacks in prison, I don't have a criminal record. I'm as black as anybody you've seen. My parents never had criminal records. As far as welfare goes, I've never been on welfare. My mom and dad have never been on welfare. As far as my brain size goes, I've never measured my brain size, but I'm sure it's the same size as anybody else's. And as far as those SATs go, guess what? My SAT scores allowed me to get into college. I have a college degree. My mother and father both had master's degrees. My father was working on his PhD before he passed. Now, I'm saying all this knowing that this guy barely made it out of high school. All right? Now, that's what I'm talking about. Learn everything you can about your opponent. All right? Now, I'm talking about myself and my family. But if I were to throw that in his face, I'm smarter than you, blah, blah, blah. I know within me, I have more intelligence in my little finger than he and his whole Klan group put together. But if I throw that in his face, what's it going to do? Bring the wall back up. All right. I want to keep the wall down. I just talk about myself. And that way he's hearing what I'm saying. Now, here's what happens. And I'm telling you this. I know this for a fact. I've been doing it for 37 years, and I've heard it time and time and time again over the years when some of these people quit and give me their robes and hoods and whatever else. You and whoever you know, at the end of the day, you go home, and before you go to bed, you reflect upon what transpired during the day. Same thing with him. He goes home, he's like, wow, I just had a 3-hour conversation with a black man, and we didn't come to blows. That's never happened before. And what that guy said about such and such, it makes sense. But he's black. But what Daryl said was true. Oh, but he's black. So now they're having a cognitive dissonance. All right. They know what I said was true, either because they know it to be true, or they researched it and found out that it was true, but they don't want to accept it because the source came from somebody who they consider an enemy, a black person. So how can a black person be giving me the truth? So they're struggling with that. And this goes back and forth, back and forth. That is their dilemma. And then eventually they have to make a decision. Do I disregard Daryl's skin color and believe the truth because I know it's true and change my course of direction? Or do I consider the fact that he's black and know something that he said was true, but continue living a lie? That becomes the dilemma. In most cases, fortunately, many of the people that I've dealt with, over 200, have followed the truth and left white supremacy and renounced it. But there will always be those who will go to their grave being hateful, violent, and racist. There's no change in them whatsoever. But even then, if anybody like that is willing to sit down and have a conversation with you, there is a possibility of planting a seed if you do it the right way. And you must always come back and water that seed. You just can't plant the seed and expect it to grow on its own. You must nurture it.
Man, you said there's another whole TED talk in there. It's really powerful. Really, really powerful stuff. It's like, and I think a lot of us can put ourselves in your shoes, and the minute the person says, oh, your brain's smaller, I would flip my lid. And I think that's what's happening. So that emotion, that takes courage. I mean,
think about it for a second. You know who you are. The person sitting across from you doesn't know you. So he or she is just making all kinds of wild allegations, not based on any research or any fact. They just saw you. You look like something that they consider to be inferior, and they're expressing their emotions. Don't let your emotions, get in front of you. You know who you are. But let me tell you something. Before you ever go into a meeting with someone who is your adversary, regardless of the topic, race or anything else, like I said, Always learn about them, learn their position, but you also need to check yourself. Know who you are before you walk into that meeting. Because I'm going to tell you something. If you go into a meeting with an adversary and you don't know who you are, they're going to tell you who you are. And you might walk out of that room believing them. So, check yourself first, too.
Really, really well said. I mean, you're fighting human behavior, but really powerful stuff in there. I mean, I just love that it's, on one hand, it's so simple to learn, but it's difficult to master. But everything that you said there was just really beautiful about how to approach that. Because when somebody had a question earlier, how do you handle not being scared? I mean, and that's you're the extreme example. You're going right in front of somebody from the KKK, and to be willing to say I want to learn is powerfully disarming. I mean, yeah. So,
well, I mean, fear. Fear is the greatest weapon we have. Fear is the greatest weapon we have. It's more powerful than a gun. It's more powerful than anything else, for people to walk around afraid. For me, it's more curiosity than courage. And I can tell you something. Ignorance breeds fear. But before I get into that little thing, all the traveling I did around the world, starting as a kid and through adulthood, being exposed to all these different cultures, I think wiped out any kind of fear that I would have, because I was constantly seeing different things. And so I just consider these people, I don't consider them us versus them. I just consider them to be a different culture. And again, in order to reduce, keep in mind, you may fear them, but trust me, they fear you too. They fear you too. And if you keep in mind those 5 things and provide them, you can close that gap. Okay. They want to be loved. They want to be heard. They want to be respected. They want to be treated fairly. They want the same thing for their family as you want for your family. So when you first meet them, you're like here. You're at opposite ends of the spectrum. You're adversaries. But if you spend 5 minutes with your worst enemy, you're going to find some things in common, and that gap is going to close a little bit. So when you get about right here, you have formed a relationship. You're not, you're going from adversarial to relationship. You're not best friends, but you have a congenial relationship, let's say. All right. You keep on talking, that gap is going to close some more, because you're going to find more things in common. And now here, you're on a friendly basis. You're heading towards a friendship. And by the time you get here, you have so much in common that the trivial things you find in contrast, such as skin color, or whether you go to a mosque, a temple, a church, or a synagogue, begin to matter less and less, And you have to think about things like, for example, you find things in common like churches, for example. You have a black church and a white church. Let's say a white Baptist church and a black Baptist church. They both read the same King James Bible. So they worship the same Jesus Christ and God. So why do you have 2 separate churches? Well, the reason is because back in the day, black people couldn't go to the white church. They had to have their own church, and they just kept it that way. And now today, some of them, intermingle, etc. But sometimes there's still a fine line, even within the church, that we need to get over. Because, you go, let's say you're a black Baptist and you go to a white Baptist, you go to a white Baptist church, and you ask, one of your white counterparts, do you really accept me as your brother in Christ? And the guy says, oh, absolutely, man, absolutely, and gives you a big hug. And then you say, but would you accept me? You accept me as your brother in Christ, but would you accept me as your brother-in-law? There's a difference there. They might struggle with that one. But if you can accept me as your brother in Christ, then you should be able to accept me as your brother-in-law if your sister wants to marry me.
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, have you run for president of the United States?
Man, you got me running for everything.
you do. I mean, yeah, and I want to start wrapping up because we're actually past the scheduled time. But I just love, when you start talking, it's like Yeah, I mean, everybody. I'm glad. I'm really appreciate you doing this. This Q&A. Your experience, your story, and your experience of everything is extremely powerful, and great lessons. And nobody. I love you as an example when I work with speakers, because nobody can. You're on the extreme. You can't. There's no excuse not to. Anybody watching this, there's no excuse for you not to sit down and listen to somebody that you disagree with, especially over Thanksgiving and politics. I mean, look at Daryl. He reaches out to the KKK. You can't. I mean, you can't get more extreme than that. So it's a good lesson for people to learn. Okay, I'm going to sit down.
Thanksgiving is coming up, like the week after next. And listen, you folks, I want you all to have an excellent Thanksgiving, and don't be afraid of going to have Thanksgiving dinner with your family because, you know, sister so-and-so voted for this one and brother so-and-so voted for that one, and it's going to be a big explosion at the dinner table. No, you know, accept whoever they voted for. That's their right to vote for whomever. But, you know, ask them, just say, hey, you know, help me understand why you voted for that person. You know, don't attack me. Just tell me why you voted for that person so I can understand. And then tell me why you think the person I voted for is bad. But don't put your emotions in front of you. And if I can go to a Klan rally and have these conversations, certainly you can sit down at your own family table for Thanksgiving in a week or two and have these conversations.
Absolutely. To close things up, when we're talking about courage of your story, and just that story that you said that you can go to a Klan member, and that takes tremendous courage. Our team, our TEDx Neighborhood Leadership team, came up. This is our 11th year of doing this, and we decided to come up and create an award, and we call it the Courageous Idea Award. And I'm bringing this up because you're the first official recipient of this, and we don't. This is something that we're not going to do lightly. It's not something that we're going to do every year and find a speaker and create an award for you. But the impact that you've had on us, anybody that's watched this, it's getting its final touches put on. It's kind of big, so I hope you have room for it somewhere. But we have a partner, Big Stickers and Signs, and they came up with this great idea of, like, again, being TEDx Neighborhood, we like to do things bold and a little bit on the make an impact. And the award has to match what your TEDx Naperville talk has done on reaching out to the KKK. And you'll get this. We're going to show it live in our studio Saturday for the main event, and then we'll ship it to you. But what's fascinating about it is that your entire TEDx Naperville talk is etched into the award. So when you read it from the upper left to the whole thing, that's your entire talk. And we thought, yeah, well, and I got chills when we came up with the idea, because what better way to capture a courageous idea? And it's right there. You can read your entire idea in 18 minutes. Maybe you can read it in 18 minutes or less. But we wanted to share that with you and with our audience, that it's so well deserved. And we still get comments from people, you know, years later, remembering your talk because the idea is so powerful. Thank you so much. I'm really humbled and honored. I was not expecting that. I sincerely appreciate it. You know, and yeah, like I said, I'm just one person. You know, I would much rather be on stage playing rock and roll and looking out there and seeing people dance than be at a Klan rally watching people march around a burning cross with their robes and hoods and shouting white power and all this kind of thing. But, you know, it's necessary for me to do that kind of work as well. And I'm just a rock and roll piano player. I'm not a sociologist or a psychologist. So if I can do something like this, anybody out there can do it. You just must do it the right way. And I really, really appreciate it. And I'm honored and humbled by the award. So thank you for considering me. Yeah, well, no, thank you. And I mean, I'm not even going to say anything. You just summed up everything perfectly in full circle. That you're a musician and you just do what you do, and that to me is what inspiration is. Well, you know, as a band leader, you know, I've been a sideman. I've been a band leader. I played piano for Chuck Berry, the man who invented rock and roll. Played piano for him for 32 years. I have my own band. I worked with a lot of different people. As a band leader, my job on stage is to bring harmony to the voices that are on my stage, on my bandstand, whether they are the vocal voices or the voices of my instruments, the saxophone, the piano, the bass, the drums, the guitar. I want them in harmony, okay? The only time that I want dissonance is when I intentionally inject it into my music for effect,
Because if I'm playing something and all of a sudden some random dissonance happens, that's not music, that's noise. You know, somebody hit a bad note or sang out of key or something like that. That's noise. You know, that's not music. So the only time you want dissonance is when you intentionally inject it. So naturally, being a band leader and trying to bring everything on stage into harmony, when I step off my bandstand, the gig is over. And now I'm out in the streets in society, going home or just going out and enjoying myself. I want harmony around me as well out there. I want harmony in my society. So I'm just carrying my passion for harmony off the stage into my society. And that's what musicians do.
Well, don't stop doing what you're doing. So.